The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I've talked before about this Proposition 65 initiative that exists in California, and I first learned about it when I ordered a bunch of drawing pencils, just regular graphite wooden pencils off of Amazon. And I don't know if it was a product labeled specifically for sale in California, if they were shipped to me from California, or because it's sold in all 50 states, the label was on it. But it contained a label that said, in accordance with California's Proposition 65 law, Part 65, I forget the exact name of it, we are required to tell you that this product may be cancer-causing. It may be a carcinogen. And I looked at it and I said, pencil lead, which of course is not actual lead, and wood, what in that is potentially a carcinogen? And I looked it up, and it turns out that sawdust or pieces of wood that you could conceivably breathe in can be carcinogenic. And in California, that has to be disclosed because the pencils, when you shave them, could or do release little trimmings of the wood, and you could inhale those, and that could be carcinogenic. And then I did more research into this, and it turns out that I believe every printer sold in California has to have that exact same disclaimer on it. This could be a carcinogenic product that causes cancer, could be hazardous to your health. And my comment at the time was that it has become so widespread that it is effectively a warning that is simply ignored in California. I've spoken to friends of mine who live in California. My brother now lives in California. He's acutely aware of this. They basically say it's no longer of any value because it's just on everything. It's on almost everything. And now coffee is also going to have to be added to that list. A California judge has ruled that coffee sellers need to put that exact same Proposition 65 warning because coffee roasting, the roasting of coffee beans, allows the formation of acrylamide, which is a chemical, and it is a chemical considered to be carcinogenic or possibly causing reproductive harm in California. And the state has the Safe Drinking Water and Toxic Enforcement Act, which is the formal name of Proposition 65. And anytime a business has a product that includes any of those hundreds, many, many hundreds of chemicals, they have to list that. And of course, the coffee, big coffee, meaning, the trade industries that represent companies like Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts, but also smaller chains like Peet's Coffee, and I don't even know what other big coffee chains there are, but they exist, although I would never go to them myself, as many of you know. But that's a story for a different day. They are all fighting this. And I genuinely don't know how I feel about this because there are studies, and you can say, well, we can trust the studies or we can't, that show that the amount of acrylamide that is created during the roasting of coffee beans, which then are ground up, water is passed through them in order to extract coffee. To put a Proposition 65 cancer warning on coffee, it seems like a little much. In addition to that, how healthy coffee is varies. Every week we have a new study. But one could even make the case that even if it was a substantial enough quantity of acrylamide to have some kind of negative health effect, is it outweighed by the seemingly positive health impact of the coffee? I don't know, but I have real questions, and I'm all for labeling. I'm all for consumer protection and disclosures. I question the effectiveness of labeling so much stuff as possibly carcinogenic in California.
I think you are diluting the effect of the label, and maybe we should just keep it to things that we know for sure can cause cancer, like cigarettes and these other basic things that we have years and years of research on. Because I think, like you said, one week coffee's good for you, and the next week it's bad for you. I know it can be good for like longevity, but then later you find out that bad for your immune system or whatever.
Sure.
Like it goes back and forth. And I think if people see this label on just about everything, they're gonna ignore the warning altogether.
People start ignoring it, and I'm not denying that acrylamide is a carcinogen, right? I mean, that there seems to be no question about that part. The question is when you're talking about the amount that ends up in a brewed or extracted, if talking about espresso cup of coffee. Is it an amount that makes sense to even start mentioning that the coffee in total might be carcinogenic, especially remember considering that coffee is mostly water, or in the case of the milk-based drinks is significantly milk as well. So I don't know the answer. I'm open to hearing from the audience about it. I've talked before about Estonia, and the Estonian government, by virtue partially of Estonia being a small country, has made just drastic advances in technology. And they've got their voting system is one of the most advanced in the world. Their passporting system is one of the most advanced in the world. And now what the Estonian government wants to do is to collect the DNA of about 10% of all of its residents. Only 1.3 million people live in Estonia. They want 100,000 DNA, the data of 100,000 people's DNA. And in exchange, in a program that they're piloting, they will give people customized lifestyle and health advice based on their specific genetics and DNA coding. This is the first country that is going to be doing state-sponsored DNA interpretations to its citizens. I know that there are privacy concerns around this. I know that anytime you talk about getting your DNA data and sending spit to Ancestry or 23andMe or a company that does DNA testing, there's even more fears when you think about the government having that information, because then what if health insurers get it or whatever the case may be? Very American mindset based on our health insurance system, by the way. I find this super interesting because potentially what it would allow Estonia to do is to significantly better life expectancy. If Estonia starts to say, as a matter of policy, what we provide to our citizens is we'll build the roads, public schools, and also customized health and nutrition advice based on your specific DNA profile. I don't know what the far-reaching effects could be, but one could only imagine that it would lead to earlier detection and treatment of certain medical conditions, more finely tuned diet and exercise plans based on your genetics. It's 1.3 million people. It's a small country that can actually afford to do this. I think it's absolutely fascinating. And, you know, I'd want to see what the privacy, what is going to be the sort of governing policy around the data in terms of privacy. Yes, it's important. I'm not ignoring that. But I think that this is absolutely fascinating.
I think it will be a good thing. I don't think Estonia has any negative intentions when it comes to all of this, although that could be naive of me to say because this is a government after all.
Right.
What about like the concerns about how this relates to eugenics, and maybe they're trying to like test DNA to see who has like the most superior genes and the problems that could lead to? I mean, I'm not suggesting like we're going to end up with concentration camps again.
Sure.
But I think people could be concerned about that, especially in Europe.
You could certainly make that claim. I think in other countries in Europe, that might be something I'd be more worried about. Estonia seems by and large to have sort of committed themselves to being a quite progressive for modern standards, small democracy. But yeah, listen, the tides could change. You could have the government holding all of that data. Then whatever the white nationalist Estonian party, if there is one, takes control, and all of a sudden now they've got DNA data to say, we're going to do forced sterilization. But, you know, it starts to become a slippery slope argument, and I tend to try to resist slippery slope arguments.
It's always Finland or Estonia doing the cool things, like, you know, testing out universal basic income. Or having government use of cryptocurrency. Like, they're getting into all of these different fields ahead of the rest of the world. And
I'm looking actually at visiting Estonia relatively soon. I've got some contacts in one of my favorite cities in the world, Brussels, Belgium, who are doing a project on new media and democracy in Estonia, where you can it's become this test bed of so many interesting technological projects that are sort of tied into progressive ideals. Because of its size, it's able to try out a lot of interesting things. And I don't have anything to announce yet. And I guess I'll say this is potentially during the next 12 months, but I am in talks about a visit that would bring me to Estonia. And I've wanted to visit Tallinn, the capital there. Just seems absolutely fascinating.
And you mentioned Brussels, Belgium. I'd love to go there someday.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to plan an upcoming vacation.
That would be a great place to go. Brussels. I don't necessarily do like a ranking of my favorite cities, but I think if I were to say my top 5, other than cities in the U.S. and my birth city of Buenos Aires in Argentina, my favorite 5 cities would be, in no particular order, Paris, Brussels, Tel Aviv, Rome.
London?
Nah, you know, I know that our English audience is not going to like me for that, but London is not on my list of favorite cities, although it would come in my top 10, but not my top 5. You know, I really like Lisbon. Lisbon
Yeah,
I
I've been to
found to
Lisbon.
be absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, what? No, what am I saying? Amsterdam. Amsterdam
Yeah.
rounds out my top 5, and Lisbon would certainly be beyond that.
That's just because of all the activities you can do in Amsterdam, right?
Sure, yes. I don't know what those are, but I've read that there are lots of activities. Bike riding, I'm aware of. I don't know what are you thinking of?
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
I haven't been there.
couldn't think of any others. Yeah. Okay. Low calorie diets, caloric restriction. This is something that's been toyed with by nutritionists and nutritional therapists and scientific community for a long time. We've seen that in various animal species, rats, monkeys, fish, that reductions in the quantity of calories consumed seem to correlate with longer life expectancy. It's not been hugely studied in humans until now, but we now have the work of clinical physiologist Leanne Redman, who did a study at Pennington Biomedical Research Center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She says that once they found people to take part in the study, which was not that easy, that by reducing 25% of calories consumed, it slowed metabolism and reduced free radicals causing cell damage and aging. That, in other words, it reduced that. It had a positive effect on those free radicals that would normally cause the aging process. Now, there are a number of different questions here as to the long-term impact, because to do caloric restriction over a very long time, if it's significant, we know, I mean, look at North Korea versus South Korea, two populations that started out as completely identical physically before the separation of Korea into North and South. The persistent caloric restriction as a result of famine, right, not deliberate caloric restriction, has led to significant health problems, persistent malnutrition, people that are physically shorter and smaller and weaker than their counterparts in South Korea. So this is one of those, I don't want to call it a fad in any way. It's a legitimate field of research, but it's one of those where there's a certain level of privilege associated with doing this deliberately. There's the popular weekly fasting that people do, where they will take 24 and 36-hour periods where they don't eat anything. So it's considered sort of a diet type program where you might have your dinner at 6 p.m. one day and then not eat again until 6 p.m. the next day.
Yeah.
Or you might have breakfast at 6 a.m. and not have anything else to eat until noon the following day, which would be 30 hours or something like that. And there's all sorts of claims made around how this affects your metabolism, so on and so forth. I'm not familiar enough with the studies to really know the impact, but it is big picture something that you can do if you're in a position of privilege where you don't have to worry that if you skip a meal now, you might not be able to get one when your, quote, fast is over. So I think that that's something that's just a real thing. It's people in particular positions that can even experiment with this stuff.
Yeah, and we've all known for a long time, and it's pretty intuitive, that if you eat less, obviously you're going to be healthier. You're probably going to live a longer life because you're slimmer and your heart rate's going to be lower.
Well, it depends how much less, right?
Yeah, less compared to what? I understand that. But because you're actually it's your metabolism that's affecting your health.
Yeah.
I think that seems like a new revelation, and you should be eating less just for that sake.
Yeah, although we do know part of the whole idea of doing the occasional 24 and 36-hour fasts is that once you are not consuming calories in the form of food, your body starts to metabolize different substances in your body. And of course, there are claims that dietitians made that say when you do, not even so much dietitians, they're sort of bordering on pseudoscience, and I don't want to say too much more than that because I've not studied it myself, where your body will start consuming fat once you don't eat for a while, and that is a great way to lose fat but not muscle. But then there's counter studies that say, no, you'll also start to lose muscle during these periods of fasting. Then the question is just, can you build the muscle back up more quickly than the fat builds back up when you go back to eating and working out? I hesitate to dive too deeply into this. I'm aware of the assertions that are made, but I really am unsure how much of it is really backed in science.
I feel like there's so much else to consider when it comes to health and nutrition, like what types of foods you should be eating, what types of foods you should be avoiding, what kind of exercise you should do.
Yeah.
So it gets even more confusing when you add in when you should be eating and when you shouldn't be eating. I know instead of like doing that thing where you take 24 or 36 hours off from eating, a lot of people will eat for like 12 hours or are allowed to eat within a 12-hour period.
Yep.
And then just fast for 12 hours.
Right.
And alternate that day by day. And that's a pretty popular thing nowadays.
That's another one. Yeah. You have breakfast at 7. You have dinner by 7 p.m. and that's it. Then you're not eating for 12 hours. Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
I don't think I could either. Yeah. I mean, I'm used to having like small meals, like probably 5 small meals. So for me, it'd be pretty tough to go to that. And I get sort of hungry right before bed, and I would just have trouble falling asleep. I think that if I was on something like, if I'm going to bed at 11 and I'm not eating after 7, I think it'd be difficult for me.
Yeah. I do the big breakfast thing.
Yeah.
And that powers me through the show, all the way through the day. Like I'll just have like snacks here and there while I'm working here. Right. And then I just eat maybe like 3 or 4 meals later on that are a little bit smaller. Wow. But I do eat a lot. I do eat a lot.
Wow. I don't even know that I could even dig into that at this point, because that's just a shocking revelation to a lot of the audience. Let's actually even completely delete that out from the show. Yeah, because we don't want that. That's going to raise more questions than it answers, and I think that we could let's just say no one's talking about the Keurig scandal anymore. Let me put it that way. All right, that's it for today's bonus show. Next week is going to be very, very different. You'll see why on Monday.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.